Aloha. Welcome to Making Democracy Work. This is a program sponsored by the League of Women's Voters Education Fund. I'm Kaui Lucas, and with me today is Jonathan Ho from the Department of Ag. And I recently got connected with Jonathan because I took a little trip to Home Depot on Halloween, and I got a nasty trick. And the nasty trick was I went into the garden department, even though I went there for a light bulb, right? It's always like, that isn't why I went to Home Depot. But while I was at Home Depot, well, let's just have a look. I heard something very disturbing. Let's play that video.
Only one frog.
Okay, so I was really upset because I lived in Honolulu for 2 years and lost a lot of sleep over Coqui. And so that started this discussion, and I posted the little video online, and we've had over 10,000 views of that video and some more of the other one. And so I know that people are out there are kind of interested in Coqui, but there seemed to be this place where, okay, wait, it's where it's completely unacceptable for them to be, but they're there. And so what do we do? Because I felt like my experience wasn't optimal. And I called a couple of friends that I happen to have who are on the Big Island Invasive Species Council and the Hawaii Invasive Species Council, and they assured me that they would call the Department of Ag the next morning, and that it would be handled. So I did leave while the Coqui were still chirping, with the knowledge that something would happen. So that's how I met you, Jonathan.
Yes.
And so why don't you take up the story from there and kind of talk about what happens when somebody finds a Coqui on Oahu where they're not supposed to be?
Yeah, ultimately, what happens is when we get a Coqui report, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the caller or that the frog itself is actually a Coqui frog. A lot of times we get house alarms, cars, fire. You'd be surprised what people think. Kolea, actually, as they fly at night. A lot of people will report that as Coqui. So a lot of time, what it boils down to is a lot of people don't really know what Coqui sounds like, especially on Oahu, because they're not really exposed to it as opposed to the folks on Hawaii Island. So that's the first thing we do. We want to make sure that it is actually a Coqui frog. Clearly, your video was a Coqui frog. And that was something we've been trying, that particular frog we've been trying to catch for some time, about 2 weeks, actually. We had gotten a couple of other people who had notified us as well for that particular frog, and you were the first person to take a video of it, which was great because there's no you're not going to have to confirm whether or not it's a Coqui, because again, a lot of people, you try to whistle, you play recordings, they're just not certain a lot of times. But when you get multiple people calling at for the same place, for the same type of thing, and all the symptoms of what a Coqui is supposed to do are being reported to you, there's a frog. And we were trying to catch that frog. And so you took your video on the 31st. We heard about it on the 1st, and we actually sent folks there that night to try to catch the frog. And while we were talking to the folks at Home Depot, one of the workers had said that, "Oh, I found the frog after you did." And he found the plant, it jumped out, he stepped on it. We never found the body, unfortunately. So we've gone since then, so that was the 1st. So today is the 13th. We've gone 5 other times to Home Depot since then, and we haven't heard anything. So we're fairly confident that the frog that was there that you reported is now gone.
I've gone twice myself.
Okay, great. So we've gone 7 times, and so hopefully that's the only frog there. And we're working with them, and not only the folks at Evil A. We're also working at the one in Kapolei and also the folks at Pearl City, to get management to be a little bit more aware about what they need to do. If they hear a frog, they should be calling us immediately, and trying to hey, cordon the plants off. Leave the frog where it is. If you don't disturb him, he'll make noise, but he's not going to move or anything like that.
You don't think so? You don't think so?
They're very territorial, and we've done captures where you find the frog, they jump away, and you're like, shucks, I lost them. And you're trying to find them, can't find them. You leave. You come back 20 minutes later. They're right on the same spot they were. They know that spot is great. They'll go back to it. And so if you leave them alone, they find a place they like to call. They generally will stay there as long as you're not really messing around with the plants, stuff like that. They'll go back to the same spot every single night to call for the females. And so if they leave the plants there, they don't disturb them. Keep it nice and wet. We go the next day or that day, we can catch it. So the main thing is that they let us know, and then they obviously try not to sell the plants and distribute them.
So there's no actual law about, anything that they have to do except call you.
Yeah, right now, intentional movement is something that we would be able to take action against them. If there was somebody knowingly moving coqui frogs, that would be something where we could take potentially criminal action against somebody. In these types of scenarios, the intent is clearly not to move coqui. They're moving plants, which may have coqui, and and what's unfortunate with regards to coqui is that it's not a pest that only travels on a specific host. And the way regulation works from a quarantine standpoint is generally you regulate the host to prevent the movement of the pest. So, for example, you have an aphid that attacks taro. You don't move taro so that you don't move the aphid. Coqui is on everything. We've caught coqui on boats, pipes, porta potties, derelict vehicles, pallets, and those are all things which we don't regulate. So it creates kind of a conundrum in that, yes, you happen to find a coqui frog in the garden center. Did it come with a plant from an infested area? All we know is that there's a coqui frog there. So that kind of creates some of the regulatory challenges, in that determining the source, how did it get there, and who is liable, and all that type of stuff.
How often does this happen?
So at least for that, for the video you took for that particular Home Depot location, in the last 2 years, we've had 2 reports of 2 individual frogs. The first one that we had was in June, and we caught that frog, and then we have the second one, and hoping that frog is dead, which I'm pretty certain he is at this point. Those are the only 2 that we're aware of in the last 2 years.
And then on Oahu in general, how many would you say have you?
A lot. Can
you round number a lot?
150 maybe this year, 150.
150 reports or
probably frogs, probably individual frogs. Reports, probably 50 to 60, I would say, this year.
So you've caught 150.
Probably, yeah, frogs. That's probably a pretty
good job.
Pretty good estimate.
But yeah. I'm really shocked that there were that many to catch.
Yeah, a lot of them, we have kind of, I guess, essentially like kind of problem areas, and where they have like really small breeding populations. So we've been working with the landowners to not only consistently go and remove frogs that we can catch, but also to treat the areas. And make sure that they're, again, isolating those areas and they're not moving the plants.
Okay, so for Oahu, where are those?
Essentially, we have one problem in Palolo Valley, and the rest that we know of are all in Waimanalo. Yeah.
I did report coqui in Waimanalo several years ago when I was living there.
Okay, good.
So.
Ultimately, what it boils down to is we need conscientious folks like yourself to be able to, report. The My branch has 90 people fully staffed throughout the whole state, and so to be able to be everywhere that a frog could be.
Obviously, you can't be.
Yeah, and ultimately, having, your video have 10,000 people, I'm hoping that, there are people that did watch that video. It wasn't just, clickbait, but they watched that video, they'd understand what Coqui sounds like, and that if they do hear that sound, that they call us so that we can go and do something about it before it becomes a problem.
So that pest number is statewide, but
Yes.
each island seems to have its own invasive species office, right?
So the plant quarantine branch. So I'm from the State Department of Agriculture. So yeah, we have our own offices statewide, and then each island does have its own individual invasive species committee that works as well.
That's right. I forgot to introduce you officially. You are the acting plant quarantine director of the
Yes.
Department of Ag.
Yes.
For the state.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No, that's not a problem. I wear the same uniform as everyone else, so I like to hide in plain sight.
So there's the reporting thing, and then you guys only have 90 people statewide
Correct.
to handle. We're not just talking about coquis. We're talking.
Yes. So my branch, we regulate we regulate importation and inter-island movement. So basically, we regulate the domestic importation of plants, plant parts, non-domestic animals, known cultures of microorganisms, and soil. So any of those things being imported into the state have to come through an inspector and be inspected and passed prior to release into the state. And then inter-island movement as well. So plants and non-domestic animals, those things moving inter-island as well, also are regulated by us.
So thinking about it from a numbers point, you're actually pretty okay with two reports in a year. That's.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
That particular location, we were talking to the staff. They get a shipment about every 3 weeks, and I'm not sure what the total volume of the plants are, but if you're looking at every 3 weeks, they're getting a shipment. That's a lot of shipments, and 2 frogs in 2 years. So clearly, the nursery industry is doing as much as they can do to be as close to 100% as possible. And can we do more? Absolutely, but it's going to take more than just the state, and I think it's going to be a lot of outreach from the retailers, the transportation companies, and the producers, as well as the regulators and the general public, to all be able to tackle this problem, because it's everybody's problem.
I found the Kohala's Kohala Coqui Coalition
Yes.
has made a very nice little video that I thought was a great tool to sort of teach people what a coqui looks like and so forth. So let's have a look at that.
Yeah.
The coqui frog infestation in North Kohala has escalated. Property owners should be prepared to eliminate frogs on their property. If you want your home to be coqui free, follow these simple steps. Coquis are hitchhikers. They can hide out in many different places on your ride back from Kona or Hilo. Be sure to check under and around your car when returning from out of town. They also hide out in potted plants and lumber piles. Coquis like to live above the ground, typically on big-leafed plants. This includes tea, palm, and banana. Keep these and other plants away from your house. Don't let the plants get too thick. Frogs love a good place to hide. Coquis begin their call around sunset. To hunt the frogs, you'll need patience and a flashlight. You can catch the frogs in your hand and can eliminate them humanely by placing them in the freezer for several hours. You can also spray them. You can make your own 16% citric acid solution at home. You'll need a bag of citric acid powder, a small sprayer, safety goggles, and rubber gloves. To make the proper solution, mix 2.5 cups of citric acid powder to every gallon of water. Please mix in small quantities. Storing citric acid for several days can corrode the metal parts in the sprayer. Support Kohala by getting your neighbors committed to making our community Coqui free.
Very nice.
Yes, that basically hits all the points. You know, the hitchhiking thing is probably the biggest thing. Like I said, boats and cars and basically anything that sits can be harborage for frogs.
And thinking about that, as they mentioned, it's like, how often do you check under your car after you came home from Costco? I mean, you know,
Yeah,
you're worried about.
Yeah. Well, I think what it boils down to is I think a lot of it is also I think it's proximity to I think an infested area. So for example, if you're going to Costco, you're in a parking lot, you know, the likelihood of you getting a frog in the middle of a parking lot is pretty much nil. If you're going to be going to, you know, somebody, you know, if you're going to be going to Paneva, potentially, and you're going to be parking overnight, I'd be a little bit more concerned. Like, but you know, and I think it really boils down to like timing. Overnight or when it's wet and the proximity to like vegetation or something like that, I'd be a little bit more concerned. But if you're in the middle of a parking lot, it's hot during that day, the frogs aren't.
No frogs. Okay.
Yeah.
That was a bad example. Okay.
No, but I mean, but the reality is that yeah, it's very possible that there could be a frog on a vehicle. And again, where you're driving, it's unlikely, but it is possible. And it'd be more, I would say, things that you're moving. With your vehicle that are probably going to be a bigger likelihood, like either plants or, you know, and anything that's been basically sitting out in the environment, exposed into the environment is where you're going to have the potential for frogs.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the other nasties that we have happening that make your life interesting. The little fire ant. Tell us about the little fire ant. We have a couple of pictures of them. Tell us about, what are we looking at?
Yeah, so basically what that picture was a baited stick a baited chopstick with some peanut butter and actually the ants crawling on it. So what we do is we actually use that exact same method to survey for ants. When we do inspections and then nursery certification, stuff like that, we actually take peanut butter, a very thin amount of peanut butter on a stick, and you lay them out there, and the ants go right to it. It's very effective, and
only fire ants will go to the stick, or all ants?
Basically, so ants, they're generally you have
sweet,
sweet, and then you have like protein, and then you have like oil type. So little fire ant will take sugar as well, but they prefer the oil from the peanut butter. They prefer that. But you can do hybrid baits, like you can do like jam and jelly, for example, and then you can catch both types of ants. But generally speaking, when like in places that are heavily infested, you're only going to find little fire ant. You're not going to find anything else. But other ant species will go to peanut butter.
Well, why is that?
They're just so effective. The biology of that species is the queens, they basically bud. So the colony will make new queens, and the queen will kind of just walk away and make her own colony. But these ants, the queens kind of all talk to each other, so they don't fight. Like a lot of other ant species, like you have two different colonies, they'll fight with each other. These guys, they'll make a new colony, and this colony, hey, cuz, what's up? And then they will make a new colony and a new colony. So eventually what you have is just one enormous colony that everybody doesn't fight, and they basically just overrun everyone else.
And that's what happens when you have women in leadership roles.
No comment.
No, but tell us why little fire ant is getting a lot of attention. I mean, I keep hearing about it, and
it's a terrible environmental, agricultural, and basically a lifestyle pest. it can sting you. Like in high, when if you're underneath trees. Well, let me step back. They're an arboreal species, so they like to live in trees. And for a species that lives in trees, it doesn't hang on very well. So a lot of times it'll climb up trees. The wind blows. They'll just rain down on you. They'll get in your clothes, and then they'll start stinging you. And that behavior, the stinging, is what makes them really terrible. And so I think in a lot of places in Hilo, you have a lot of like blinding of animals. Their eye, like the ants will sting their eyes, so you have like this kind of clouding of their eyes. You have like agricultural workers. They don't want to work. I mean, you're getting stung perpetually.
Wow.
And the ants, they...
You mean you're just, like, if you're just out in a field or whatever, and the wind blows the ants onto you?
Because they're all in the trees. So, like, if you're working in a macadamia orchard, or lychee, longan, all the tree crops, the ants are climbing in the trees. They're all in the trees, and basically what they do, they're farmers. The ants are actually farming all the little scaled insects that are on the trees. And when the wind blows, some of them fall. And you happen to be underneath the tree, they fall on you, and generally they're okay, but your clothes kind of pat them, and they get scared, and they sting.
It's very painful. I have been stung.
Yeah,
I'm sure you've been stung many times.
And you're getting that 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day if you're working. You don't want to work. Yeah, so that's what makes it terrible. And then, when you have a single species out there, it outcompetes everything else, and then what native insect life or whatever may be out there, they're basically affecting all of that as well.
They just take over.
Yep.
Everything moves out. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if it moves out. I think they just wipe them out. I think they're just not there anymore. Whether they move or what, but they're just not there anymore. Yeah.
Well, that's spooky.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and then you were talking before we started about the coconut rhinoceros beetle, which I know is also here.
Yes, only on Oahu, thankfully.
Only on so far.
Yeah. Yes.
So tell us about that.
So basically, yes. So coconut rhinoceros beetle is, it's a very large beetle. I don't have any, but it's a very large beetle, but maybe about the size of your thumb. And the adults actually attack coconut palm. They prefer coconut palm, and they drill they basically bore these really large holes into the crowns of trees, and they can actually kill trees in high densities. The coconut palm is like the quintessential paradise plant. When you think of a beach, you think of coconut palms. So it is a big problem for tourism, and also for the native palms as well. They will attack pretty much any palm, and it's the genetics of the ones that we have in Hawaii seem to occur possibly from Guam, and basically what we have an entire program dedicated to control and eradication of rhino beetle from Oahu. We recently have 2 canine detector dogs that are only looking for rhino beetle larvae. And hopefully we can find. Basically, the larvae live in mulch piles, so they're not actually damaging. They basically just eat dead, dying plant material. So the larvae actually have a pretty strong smell, and the dogs can hone on it really well. So using the dogs to find those breeding sites, removing the breeding sites, and hopefully you can then break the breeding cycle so that you don't have any new adults coming out.
So is there a possibility that there will be a Coqui dog?
I don't see why that isn't possible. That is very. I've heard them train dogs to find snails. They do actually. They do use.
Do you
dogs.
guys have snail dogs?
We do not. They actually. The one that I'm aware of is in Florida for the giant African land snail. It's a real big pest in Florida. They don't have it. We have it all over the place.
I was about to say, wait, don't we have that?
We have it all over the place. They don't have it too many places. So they actually have a dog team that only does giant African land snail. And the dog is really good at finding them. So,
wow.
So I'm sure you could train a dog to find a snail. I'm sure they could train them to find a frog.
Does plant quarantine, do you guys take on the canine training? Is that something that your department does?
We do have detector dogs. We have 3, and we use them primarily for brown tree snake detection.
Oh.
So yeah, we have a federal grant with the Office of the Interior to run a detector dog program specifically for brown tree snake interdiction. There aren't, they do flights and boats, basically anything that comes from Guam, Northern Australia, Papua New Guinea, basically any place that brown tree snake is known to occur. And we conduct inspections on planes and boats 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear about this.
Yeah, so yeah, I think the last reporting period was like 99% of the flights are caught by inspectors. And again, any time of day or night, we have people out there.
Have you found any with the dogs? Snakes with the dogs?
Actually, no. So that's a good thing. And it's not to say that the dogs are ineffective. We are basically a secondary measure. So all the planes and the boats and stuff that leave Guam are already checked by detector dogs before it gets here.
Okay.
And so yeah, so they have their own program. We're basically follow up to ensure that they don't miss anything. And I think the last time there was a snake was like in the late 90s.
Wow, that's really good.
Yeah, and then at that point we had the program set up. So.
Well, thank you, Jonathan, for making me feel much better about the state of our coqui control and coming down and talking about all the some of the other pests that we have. So we'll put the number up there, and it's also, I have to give you kudos on your app. That was a really easy thing to use to report, to go online to the pest, 643pest.org.
Yes.
.org,
yeah.
And filled out that little form. That was great.
Yeah, and I think the phone number has been there. The 643pest phone number has been there a long time, and the department in collaboration with HISC has been trying to get into mobile devices. Yeah.
Well, good job. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.